Clark, step back three. Oh, she hit it and draws the foul. Welcome back, Caitlyn Clark.
I always wanted Geno to call me just because he's Geno. Like, he's one of the best coaches of all time.
If you're a college player and you're a great college player, like Caitlyn was, the delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying the disrespect that they've shown to the WNBA. There's a huge target on this kid's back. Okay, this kid's coming into the league. And Diana said it best. This kid's in for a rude awakening.
Like Geno Auriemma could be the reason why Caitlyn Clark is definitely not joining the Unrivaled 3-on-3.
The roar of the crowd is the soundtrack of victory. The squeak of sneakers, the swish of the net, the eruption of 20,000 voices, these are the sounds we know. But sometimes, the most seismic shifts in sports happen in silence. Not in the final seconds of a championship game, but in a quiet office over a phone line that goes dead. Not with a shouted declaration, but with a single, calm, deliberate refusal. This is a story about that silence. It's a story about a revolution that didn't need a protest, a rebalancing of power that required no manifesto. It's the story of how the most talked about athlete in a generation, Caitlyn Clark, and the most dominant coach in the history of her sport, Geno Auriemma, found their fates intertwined in a clash that was years in the making. A clash that wasn't settled on a hardwood court under blinding lights, but in the shadowy realms of respect, legacy, and control. And it all culminated in one word: no. To understand the weight of that refusal, you have to rewind. You have to go back to before the sold-out arenas, before the record-breaking Nielsen ratings, before the deep logo threes became a national phenomenon. You have to go back to a young girl in Des Moines, Iowa, dreaming of the blue and white. For decades, the University of Connecticut wasn't just a college basketball program. It was a myth, a factory of championships.
Like I said earlier, they actually had odds that, she was like third or fourth in the betting odds to be MVP of the WNBA. That's such a slap in the face to every WNBA player. It's unbelievable.
A forge of legends. For any young girl serious about the game, UConn was the sun around which all other orbits circled. It was dynasty incarnate, and at the center of it all was Geno Auriemma, not just a coach, but an architect, a curator of greatness. His approval wasn't just a scholarship offer, it was an anointment. To be chosen by Geno was to have your potential validated by the ultimate authority. To be ignored by him was, in the unspoken language of the basketball world, a verdict. Caitlyn Clark, the electric, audacious point guard with vision that seemed to bend time and space, grew up in that world. She saw the banners, the legends, Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, Breanna Stewart. She felt the pull. "I wanted UConn to recruit me," she would later say, with a telling simplicity. "I always wanted Geno to call me, just because he's Geno. Like, he's one of the best coaches of all time." The call never came. When the recruiting cycle for a class heated up, the silence from stores was deafening. No phone calls to her, no letters to her family, not even a serious whisper through the AAU grapevine. For the sport's most famed talent scout, a man renowned for identifying and
That's the worst part about new fans. They have no perspective. There's no context. So they just say ridiculous nonsense.
pursuing greatness with relentless focus. This wasn't an oversight, it was a statement. The message was clear, cold, and deliberate. You are not a priority. The public explanation, offered later, was logistical. UConn had already secured a commitment from another generational point guard, Paige Buchers. The narrative was that Geno didn't want two ball-dominant guards in the same class. A basketball decision, pure and simple. But then came the subtle twist of the knife, the part that transformed a tactical choice into a personal slight. The suggestion floated from the UConn sphere that if Caitlyn Clark really wanted to be a Husky, the onus was on her. She should have called him. She should have fought her way into the dynasty. Let that sink in. A teenager at the mercy of a recruiting process that holds all the power over her dreams was implicitly blamed for not sufficiently courting the most powerful man in her sport. The gatekeeper had not only closed the gate, he had implied she hadn't knocked loudly enough. Clark didn't protest. She didn't take to social media. She didn't give interviews bemoaning her fate. She absorbed the silence. She remembered the slight. And she made a decision.
I wanted UConn to recruit me. I always wanted Geno to call me just because he's Geno. Like, he's one of the best coaches of all time. Geno never called me.
That would alter the trajectory of women's basketball. She chose the University of Iowa. To the outside eye, it looked like a step down. Iowa had no dynasty. It had no aura of inevitability. It was a good program, a solid program, but it wasn't the program. It wasn't UConn. For Clark, however, that was the point. Iowa wasn't a consolation prize. It was a blank canvas. There were no pre-existing legends to live under, no systemic way of doing things to conform to. At Iowa, she wouldn't be the next in line. She would be the first. She wouldn't be borrowing prestige. She would be building it. And build it she did. From her very first game, something felt different. Those 30-foot shots weren't just high-risk attempts. They were declarations of independence. They said, I play the game my way. The packed crowds at Carver Hawkeye Arena weren't just showing up for a team. They were gathering for an event. Every no-look pass, every audacious heat check three, every triple-double wasn't just a statistic. It was a brick in a new monument, built far from the shadow of the old one. The numbers became absurd. Scoring records fell. Attendance records shattered. Television ratings for Iowa games began to rival, and then surpass those.
Who would have thought that all those years ago back in Des Moines, Iowa, that this would be the case right now? And obviously we can see that it's done pretty darn well, and people are excited to see her play at every level.
The premier men's contest. A star was being born, but more importantly, a new ecosystem was forming. A fan base was coalescing, not just Iowa fans, but basketball fans, sports fans, Caitlyn Clark fans. They were young girls in replica jerseys, fathers and sons drawn in by the sheer spectacle, casual viewers who had never watched a women's game before. They were a movement. And through it all, from his throne in stores, Geno Auriemma watched. His initial silence morphed into a pattern of subtle and then not so subtle diminishment. He rarely used her name without a qualifier. She was a kid. Her style of play was likened to just messing around in a driveway. While the world saw a revolutionary talent pulling the sport into the mainstream, Geno often framed her as a talented but undisciplined phenom, a product of hype more than substance. His praise, when it came, was often backhanded, laced with comparisons that always seemed to loop back to his own players, particularly Paige Bucher's. If Clark did something spectacular, it was noted that Paige had done it too, or could do it, or had done it within the system. This wasn't just coaching bias, it was a narrative strategy. By tethering Clark's exploding stardom to the archetype of the UConn player, the disciplined, system-oriented champion Geno was attempting to maintain a sense of control. He was trying to fold her unprecedented success back into the old framework, to make it seem like a validation of his model, not a challenge to it. The subtext was clear.
And there's a lot of investors in this league. One investor, been trying to keep quiet about, his investment in the league ever since his comments that he made about a young rookie. Pretty much, had him in the headlines for about a month and a half. That is Geno Auriemma, dog. I'm here to tell you, he's part owner of this league.
What you're seeing is impressive, but it's not new. We built this template, but the template was cracking. Clark's fame became a cultural force, transcending sports. She was on talk shows, in national ad campaigns, on the cover of video games. The Caitlyn Clark effect became a measurable economic and social phenomenon, and Geno's role as the central authority of women's basketball began to subtly erode. The spotlight, for so long something he could command or bestow, was now fixed on a player who had never asked for his permission to shine. The tension simmered until it boiled over in the summer of 2024. On the Dan Patrick Show, Geno abandoned nuance. Frustration poured out, not at Clark directly, but at the engine of her revolution, her fans. The delusional fan base that follows her, he charged, disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart. He cited betting odds that had Clark finishing high in MVP voting as a rookie as evidence of this disrespect. His words were scalding. These people are so disrespectful and so unknowledgeable and so stupid that it gives women's basketball a bad name. It was a staggering miscalculation. In one rant, he labeled the very people who were buying tickets, tuning in, and creating unprecedented buzz for the sport as delusional and stupid. He framed their optimism, their belief in a player they adored, as an attack on the WNBA's established veterans. He positioned himself not as a steward of the game's growth, but as a defender of an old guard against an influx of passionate, but in his view, ignorant newcomers. The backlash was immediate and fierce. But the most powerful rebuttal didn't come on social media, it came on the court. Caitlyn Clark entered the WNBA with a target on her back the size of a billboard. Veterans tested her, defenses hammered her. The adjustment was real, and she struggled at times. But she adapted, she fought, and she delivered. She won Rookie of the Year unanimously. She was named to the All-WNBA first team, and when the MVP votes were tallied, she finished 4th, exactly where those so-called delusional betting odds had predicted. It was a moment of supreme, silent vindication. The fans he had mocked were proven prescient. The player he had consistently downplayed had just authored one of the greatest rookie seasons in league history.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart. There were actually odds on she's 3rd or 4th in betting odds on being MVP of the WNBA. These people are so disrespectful and so unknowledgeable and so stupid that it gives women's basketball a bad name. Okay, so the kid was set up for failure right from the beginning.
Clark didn't need to say a word. The box scores, the awards, the standings said it all. His authority, his judgment had been publicly, definitively, and humiliatingly questioned by reality itself. This is where the story moves from public rivalry to behind-the-scenes power play. Stung in seeing his influence wane, Geno Auriemma pivoted. If he could no longer control the narrative through commentary, he would try through commerce. Enter Unrivaled, a new, ambitious 3-on-3 women's basketball league. Founded by UConn legends Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, it was billed as a player-centric, innovative alternative. And it had a powerful, if initially quiet, investor, Geno Auriemma. The UConn Mafia, as is often called, was flexing its muscles in a new arena, attempting to build a future for the sport on its own terms. But for all its star-studded backing, Unrivaled faced a fundamental problem. It needed a gravitational center. It needed a name so big it could draw instant eyeballs, sponsor dollars, and cultural cachet away from the established WNBA. There was only one such name. And so, the ultimate irony unfolded. The coach who wouldn't make a phone call to a teenage Caitlyn Clark now found himself, through back channels and intermediaries, presenting her with an offer. Reports detailed a staggering sum, over $1 million for roughly 8 weeks of work. It was an unprecedented financial offer in women's basketball. A king's ransom meant to signal seriousness and secure a cornerstone. The offer wasn't just money. It was a rescue rope. It was a lure. It was, above all, a trap. For Geno, the calculus was clear. If Clark signed, he could finally reel her revolutionary stardom back into his orbit. Unrivaled would instantly become the story. He could frame her participation not as a rejection of the old, but as an evolution of it, a UConn-adjacent project, blessed by its legends and its coach, now capturing the sport's brightest star. It would be a masterstroke, reasserting his relevance and control in the modern era. He would, in effect, finally get Caitlyn Clark. The offer landed. The sports world held its breath. $1 million for 2 months of basketball? It seemed like a foregone conclusion, a no-brainer. Then came
They tried to do everything they could to make the most of the situation. They tried to make the most of Caitlyn Clark not playing by hinting everything and basically making people think that Caitlyn Clark was going to play.
Silence. And then, the word, no. Caitlyn Clark declined. No drama. No drawn-out negotiations. No public explanation. A clean, calm, decisive refusal. The impact of that no resonated like a thunderclap in a closed room. It wasn't just a rejection of a league or a contract. It was a rejection of the entire premise Geno had been operating on, that his platform, his system, his approval was ultimately something every player needed or wanted. Clark stripped him of his last vestige of leverage. She demonstrated that the power had irrevocably shifted. By saying no, she communicated several devastating truths. She didn't need his money. Her own brand, built independently, was already more valuable. She didn't need his platform, she was the platform. She remembered. The years of slights, from the recruiting silence to the dismissive comments about her fans, were not forgotten. They were simply accounted for. The aftermath was a study in diminished prestige. Without Clark, Unrivaled's launch lost its sense of inevitable disruption. The massive offer, instead of looking powerful, suddenly looked desperate, a Hail Mary attempt to buy relevance. The UConn Mafia flex had been met with a shrug. The gatekeeper had been left standing at his own gate, holding a golden key that no longer fit the lock. This story is bigger than two individuals. It's a parable for modern sports. For generations, athletic success was funneled through rigid pipelines, legendary coaches, hallowed programs, certain leagues. These were the gatekeepers who held the keys to exposure, development, and legacy. Caitlyn Clark's journey from overlooked recruit to cultural icon, entirely outside that traditional power structure, blew that model apart. She proved that in today's world, an athlete can build an empire directly for and with their fans. Social media, name, image, likeness, NIL deals, and a media hungry for charismatic stars create a new axis of power. The old gatekeepers are no longer the sole conduits to success. Sometimes they're just obstacles to be circumvented. Geno Auriemma's fatal mistake wasn't failing to recruit Caitlyn Clark. That was a tactical error. His fatal mistake was failing to see her. He underestimated not just her talent, but the changing landscape she represented. He believed the structures he helped build were eternal, that his authority was inherent. Clark proved it was contingent, and that the true power now resides with the athletes who can captivate the world on their own terms. Her revenge wasn't shouted from a podium. It wasn't a bitter tweet. It was the quiet confidence of building something so formidable that when the old king finally offered his crown jewel, she could look at it and say, simply, "I have no need for that." It was calm, it was calculated, it was deadly quiet, and it changed the game forever. And stories like this are unfolding every day. Not always with million-dollar offers and legendary coaches, but in draft rooms, front offices, and private meetings where the future of the game is decided. The power dynamics are fluid. The alliance is shifting. The quiet no is becoming a more powerful weapon than the loudest yes. This is the real game behind the game. The narratives you don't see on the broadcast, the leaks that reveal true intentions, the silent coups that redefine eras. This is where the sport is really won and lost. Stay locked in. The next revolution is always just a whisper away.